Dear colleagues, we continue our information marathon, and now we'll have presentation of the Speaker of the Security Service of Ukraine in the course of investigation of tragedy of MH17. Our speaker is Vitalii Maiakov, Deputy Head of the main investigation department of the Security Service of Ukraine, member of the international investigation team. Welcome. So I was introduced. Taking into account the importance of today's meeting, the leadership of the Security Service provided me with the responsibility to make presentation on this terrible tragedy. Briefly, in 2014, I was in service and we got information about bringing down passenger plane Boeing. A pre-trial investigation was started by the main department in accordance with Article 258. This is terror attack that resulted in the death of people, and the group was created. Experienced professionals, operative units, and the work started and it was carried out 24 hours in the course of this investigation. So, and in accordance with the norms of international norms, the General Prosecutor created the international investigation team, and there are detectives of the Netherlands, Belgium, Australia, and the Netherlands, and later on Malaysia joined the team. I would like to explain and to prevent some questions. The work of joint investigation team is that they may provide information only if all the parties agree. You know that on the 19th of June this year in the Netherlands, there was one more presentation based on the results of investigations concerning the work of JIT. That's why I may provide information only in the framework that were brought by the Prosecutor's General Office and others. Maybe you saw this, and a lot has been done based on the results. It was established a time and place that anti-aircraft gun was brought from the territory of Russian the Russian Federation illegally to Ukraine, and the place and the launch was identified, and the time and the route through which the anti-aircraft gun was brought back to Russia. And 4 years were needed, 3 years were needed in order to identify who are guilty people and what is their role. Because if investigators are not able to access the temporarily occupied site, the work is complicated in this case, and jointly with international partners and with procedural guidance of prosecutor's office, the group provided this information that 105 people took part in bringing this weapon to Ukraine and back to Russia, and its setting and a launch of missile, and a briefing that happened on the 19th of June. All the world community was informed that evidence were collected, and this provided the opportunity to serve sentences to serve charges to 4 people: 2 Girkin, a citizen of Russian Federation, Budinsky Pulatov, and 1 citizen of Ukraine, Harchenko. Also based on additional agreements and taking into account changes that were introduced by the Verkhovna Rada to current procedural code. Now there is a transfer of materials of criminal investigation concerning these 4 people to the bodies, law enforcement bodies of the Netherlands, and in March next year they will have a hearing on this case, and pre-trial investigation is going on, and the role of other people is established. So 150 people were involved, not 105. And the decisions will be taken based on the evidence that we will get. Because if a person is a private, just a militant who escorted this equipment, this book, he will be brought to criminal responsibility for participation in the activity of terror organization, and how his actions be qualified concerning shutdown of Boeing. This will be identified in each separate case. After this presentation in the Netherlands that happened on the side of the Security Service of Ukraine, as of 19th of June this year, the information was published about 7 charges to 4 people, to these identified persons. I think many of you know about it. To illustrate, I would like to read some aspects from this charges. Pre-trial investigation established that Girkin Igor Vsevolodovich, while being in the territory of Donetsk Oblast, organized terror attack, use of weapon, and Russian forces and anti-aircraft gun book, and at 4:20 that the Malaysian Boeing MH17 was shot down with the use of a book gun, and 298 people were killed in the result of this bringing down, and all this information is supported by the evidence. And in March, April 2014, to carry out illegal plan of Russian leadership to violate territorial integrity of Ukraine and to change the territory of Ukraine, the armed forces of Russian Federation, their leadership provided orders to their subordinates and organized in the territory of Russia and occupied territories. They established training and provided weapons to illegal armed groups, and these groups were headed by the officers of Russian Federation, by GRU, main intelligence department. They followed the orders of Russian military leadership, and they created Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, illegal formations, and they were introduced to their structure. And on the 7th of April 2014, a terror organization DPR was created, and they created their militant groups, and the coordination of the activity of this group and financial and material support with military equipment and weaponry and armaments. This support was carried out by the representatives of the Russian Federation. And as you know, in July 2014, there were big battles in Savur Mogila. The militants got supported by armed forces of Russian Federation. They got order to establish a corridor between the temporarily occupied territory to the border with Russia in order to connect with Russia, but they were not able to do this, and they invited additional support, arms from Russian Federation. An intermediary in this process was, we all know him, this is Aksionov, acting head of Crimea. So I would like to go back and to read the fragment on suspicion. In the period of April and the Russian Federation gave order to Girkin, and he used the data of Strelkov, and they had call sign first, or Strelok. They created illegal armed formation, and they had the support of Russia in this, and people who were pro-Russian and also citizens of Russian Federation who expressed wish to take part in DPR activities. And at the time, it was Colonel General Staff of Russian Federation, the 2nd of August 2014. He became Major General, and Khmury call sign, Polatov, Oleg Yevdashevich, call sign Gurza, citizen of Ukraine, Harchenko, call sign Krot, and other people who also colluded to carry out terror acts and other especially grave violations. And they used the documents to cover themselves up and call signs, and you understand that this was a difficult and long work, and you know that they delivered their speeches while wearing masks in order not to be identified. It was a difficult work to identify all these people. In order to cover up the transportation of anti-aircraft complex to the territory of Ukraine in anti-aircraft missile brigade. This is anti-aircraft brigade. This is a unit in Kursk, and they were provided with the order to bring this equipment for training. In order to support the attack of the militants on Savur-Mogila on the night from 16th to 17th of March 2014. This equipment book 3X2 was illegally transported from the territory of Russia through Donetsk of Rostov-on-Don Oblast, Severness settlement, and Sorokina, former Krasnodon of the Lugansk Oblast. That in order to cover the presence of Russian equipment, the number of this equipment was fully covered with paint. At 9:08, the person with call sign librarian informed Dubinsky, Colonel Dubinsky, who brought book with the crew to Donetsk. So this is our Donetsk. At 9:53 on the 17th of July 2014, he ordered librarian to provide this gun to Harchenko, who used call sign Krot in order to cover himself up. And before, there was information why we didn't prevent it. So in order to have this interception online, it was not carried out. And in order to get this information, it was needed. More than a year was needed. For the security service, we worked in cooperation with JIT, and we needed more than 3 years to identify these persons. That's why any accusations that we knew and didn't inform on this. These are groundless accusations. Dubinsky provided order to his subordinate, the militant of to Harchenko, to bring Buk to Pervomayska settlement in Donetsk Oblast and to carry out further control over it. The same day, there was telephone discussion. At 11:24, Dubinsky informed another member of DPR that on the 16th of July 2014, Girkin and him, they were speaking with Moscow and they reached the top level. So we understand who sanctioned bringing down this Boeing. At 1:39 on the crew of Buk in Snizhny Lenin Street, Karapetyan and Gagarin Street, they put this equipment in the field near Pervomayska. That is the geographic coordinates were established by us at 4:19. They launched the missile at Boeing at MH17 Boeing that was flying at 10,000 meters, and the warhead exploded outside at the top left of the Boeing, in the result of which the war elements dissected the cockpit and the plane was destroyed, and all 298 passengers were killed. Later on, Harchenko informed Dubinsky that they are on the site and they brought down one plane. And on the 18th of July 2014, so you may find more information on the site, at 8:01, Harchenko informed Dubinsky that call sign librarian brought Buk to the territory of Russian Federation. So Girkin is suspected that he committed terror act that led to killing of 298 people. So how did we get this result? To understand this, we'd like to present a presentation for you, and GIT met with the victims before announcing the results of investigation on the 28th of September 2016. So they didn't name these people then. To identify the role of each of them in this, several years were needed. I would like to comment on this. This is the situation in the place where the Boeing was brought down. So what we immediately did, we set base stations that were in this region, and we started to analyze traffic of connections and also intercepted communications in order to understand who can be involved into this terrible crime. I would like to explain. After we published it, we got comments how they perfectly work abroad and why we cannot do this. But this was done in the territory of Ukraine, and investigative actions may be carried out only by investigators of Ukrainian side. So GIT helped us to some extent, but all the evidence in the territory of Ukraine that were collected, they were collected by investigators and experts who are Ukrainians. This is done in English in order that the relatives of the victim understood that the work is going on, and this work is huge, and all the evidence, they objectively confirm what I've read in this charge.
Especially after last year's call to the public, many persons reported that they were willing to testify. The Vitalii was photographed and filmed several times while being transported along that route. Photographs and video clips that the team found on social media were checked for authenticity.
So this is internet photos that were imposed on this picture.
Was brought into Ukraine from the Russian Federation. Subsequently, the weapon was transported in a convoy with separatists from eastern Ukraine to the final war site.
So
How did they proceed?
this is done electronically.
Witness saw the convoy with the Vitalii in Yanakiva. In the previous hours, the convoy had traveled along a certain route from the Russian border, as appears from telecom information, including the following intercepted telephone conversation.
Паузу можно?
Can I have a pause? So you see that we now understand how these events develop. But at that time, it was difficult to understand because there were thousands of different communications that were intercepted. This is a huge analytical work.
Line, in other words, passed the border and was transported on a trailer, a white Volvo truck with a red low loader. On several photographs and videos that we found on social media and otherwise, the Volvo can be seen bearing the Vitalii with anti-aircraft missiles under a camouflage net. Witnesses that we have spoken to also testified that they had seen this vehicle with 4 missiles. The truck was escorted by a Volkswagen transporter and a UAZ jeep. The escorting officers were several armed men wearing uniforms. In Donetsk, the convoy stopped for some time at 2 locations. First at a crossing, and later on, after the convoy had turned around, it stood still on a strip at the side of the Makivka highway. In Donetsk, the convoy was seen by many witnesses, and also frequent reports about this convoy appeared in social media. Vitalii Maiakov published a photograph of the convoy in Donetsk in its magazine. This photograph was a so-called still from a video. In the meantime, the investigation team has obtained the original.
This is real video footage.
Donetsk. Starting at 1100 hours.
Can we make a pause? Due to this video and due to this phone call, we identified to whom this trailer belongs to, and we identified the person, the militant, who took it to the enterprise in Donetsk city. And in 3 years, when this person didn't expect, when it crossed the border with Russian Federation, we detained this man, and now he served his sentence here in Ukraine. We understand that this is the video from the internet. We established who made this video shooting and what was the place of footage.
For safety reasons relating to the person who actually made these images, the background has been cut out. Around midday, the white Volvo low-loader with the Vitalii arrived in Śliczna. In Śliczna, the Vitalii was loaded off the truck near the Furchet supermarket. From there on, the Vitalii drove further on its own. In Śliczna, it passed by an apartment building. Then, the last moving images of the Vitalii that are available show the system while driving towards its final destination. This final destination is farmland near Pervomayski. This is 21 kilometers southeast of the spot where flight MH17 crashed, around 4:20 in the afternoon. The investigation team has collected a large amount of evidence for the determination of the precise launch site of the Buk missile. This evidence shows without any doubt that this farmland near Pervomayski can be pointed out as the launch site. What does the evidence consist of? The investigation team has
This is not the launch. This is illustration.
very close to the launch site when the missile was launched. These witnesses spoke about a very loud noise, a violent explosion, and a high whistling sound. Other witnesses have testified that they had seen a plume of smoke, that they had seen the Vitalii at the launch site in Pervomayski, and immediately afterwards saw the missile that had been launched. In addition, some witnesses testified that they had seen an airplane crashing. Several witnesses had seen the inversion trail of the missile. The witnesses described the trail as white, very thick, and very long. This photograph of the inversion trail was made in Torres and was distributed through social media.
So this is the launch. The launch that hit the Boeing.
That this photo was manipulated. The Dutch Meteorological Institute also examined the photo, and they note that this was not a cloud or an airplane's contrail. In addition, in the spring of 2016, after long research on social media, the investigation team found 2 new photos. Since it is difficult to see the inversion trail on the photographs, we show you the photos with a filter. An analysis of visibility lines was made of the first photo and the statements of witnesses.
Це як ми спершу.
So this is how we identified the place of launch.
Where these visibility lines come together is located very close to the aforementioned farmland near Pervomayski. There are also intercepted telephone conversations which refer to the launch location, among which the following conversation.
Да, Лёнь, ты слышишь, это самое, это получается за Снежным блокпост последний перед Степановкой, налево. Правильно я сориентировался?
Вот ты в Степановке должен идти направо, через поле идти на Снежное, да, блядь, ебаное.
Ну да.
Вот иди на Снежное.
Це виводять на бойову позицію.
So they bring the book on its position. Following.
Which is located closest to the launch site. In addition, the description of the surroundings in this conversation, the field and the forest, corresponds with the surroundings of the launch site in Pervomayski. Several journalists went to the launch site near Pervomayski. Some of them were shown a piece of land which had been burnt. They saw some scorched land, measuring about 30 by 30 meters. Other journalists spoke to inhabitants of the area, who told them that the field had been on fire on the 17th of July 2014, and that they had ploughed the field in order to prevent the whole field from catching fire. It was clearly visible that the field had been ploughed.
Це справжня фотографія.
This is a real picture taken by foreign journalist, and GIT interviewed him.
The satellite images which were made of this location on the 16th of July and the 21st of July were also examined. Because of the cloudy weather, images from the days in between could not be used. The images before and after the crash show significant differences.
Це
The photo of the
супутник.
21st
This is satellite photos.
Переорали
not
все
yet
після
be seen
пострілу.
on the photo.
So they plowed it after the launch.
Also shows tracks of Caterpillar vehicles. Immediately after the launch, the Vitalii was removed. There are hardly any images of the route along which the system was removed, since this took place late in the evening and during the night. However, we have been able to
Як ховали?
partially
This is how they were hiding book and returned it to Russia.
statement of a separatist who was involved in the removal of the Vitalii. It is believed that the Vitalii drove into the direction of Shnichna autonomously. There it was reloaded onto the white Volvo low loader in the late evening hours of the 17th of July. From there, the low loader went to Krasny Luch and then via Debaltseve to Luhansk. In Luhansk, in the early morning, a video was made of the Volvo truck with the low loader carrying the Vitalii. One can see
Зараз
that at
буде
this
видно,
point
що
Now you will see that one missile is missing.
From there, the transport moved on to the Russian border and then crossed that border. The JIT has intercepted telephone conversations which took place in the morning of the 18th of July 2014. These conversations demonstrate that at that moment, the Buk was already back in the Russian Federation.
Они довели до перекрестка машину, оставили. Пацаны пошли дальше сами.
Так.
Все, машина ушла туда, куда надо. И дошла нормально все.
Я
Там просто
понимаю.
начались непонятные звонки от 10 человек.
це доповідь про те, що
So this is the report. That book was brought back to Russia.
То один, то второй, то третий, то четвертый, то, говорит, я уже заеб... говорит, потом, говорит, сам Стрелков начал звонить. Представился.
И он взял, выключил телефон, блядь, и пиздец, блядь. И мы не знаем, где машина вообще.
Машина в России.
Ну, блядь, вчера, говорю, блядь, мы не знаем ночью, блядь. Я вернулся только, блядь, там все нормально было. Ему позвонило 8 человек разных, блядь. Он передал машину, ему разные, блядь, звонят, блядь, 8 человек, блядь. Он поэтому телефон и выключил, блядь. Никуда назад он ее не вел, нихуя.
Так доложить о том, что произошло, вы могли мне?
А что докладывать, блядь?
Где
Я
сейчас
пока-
машина?
Машина уже давно в России находится. Он ее сразу передал, блядь, машину тем, кто встречал,
Кому?
блядь.
Кому?
ну ще
So there is also an interesting trailer. Maybe you've read that Russia tries by different ways to avoid responsibility for this terrible crime. And they launch different discreditation, disinformation materials that allegedly there were some plane or there was air-to-air missile. But number two, we have the materials of examination and they prove this. What was the cause of the hit, of the crash?
Nations, which were conducted by a team of forensic experts from the different countries who participate in the joint investigation team. Pieces of debris from the airplane as well as possible parts of a weapon were collected in the Ukraine. These items were transported in trucks and containers to Khilsarayan, where they checked whether parts of a weapon were indeed present among those items. The pieces of debris from the airplane were also checked for parts that
Це в
might
Нідерландах.
originate
So this is in the Netherlands at the military aerodrome. They assembled the remnants of a book. So
discovered, such as a venturi and a wing. In order to find out which missile was involved, the team collected reference material for comparison. The 9M38 series includes two types of missiles which are almost identical. The investigators dismantled several Buk missiles from the 9M38 series.
Це ми
In this
туди
way,
відвезли.
So we brought there the same missile in order to be used while examination. This is not the missile that hit the plane. This is the same type of missile.
the investigation team cannot exclusively rely on individual parts of the weapon that were found at the crash site. After all, the crash site was not a closed-off crime scene, but a freely accessible area, except for the investigators of the JIT. The team had to establish whether there is a casual link between the parts found and the shooting down of flight MH17. For this reason, it is crucial to have conclusive evidence available to prove that those parts had not already been present at the site before the crash, or had been left at the site after the crash by third parties. Such evidence was also found. We will show two relevant examples of this evidence. The warhead of the 9M38 consists of an explosive core and a sheath of
Це
preflight
вражаючий
particles.
елемент.
So this is the elements, destruction elements that I established in VUC type.
The cockpit crew, several of these particles were recovered. Moreover, one of these particles found shows traces of glass.
Це ті,
on
які
the
були.
This is what we had from the experimental missile.
surface of
А
unique
зараз
glass.
будуть
And now we will have those that were taken from the plane and the bodies.
Right through the cockpit window. Furthermore, a ball of twisted metal was found in the groove of one of the cockpit windows. This ball of metal appears to be part of a missile of the 9M38 type. The shape, dimensions, and milling traces on the metal match exactly the same part of the Buck missile that had been dismantled by the investigation team. The fact that the metal ball was distorted proves clearly that it must have been shot into the window groove with great force. Partly based on these results from the forensic investigation, we can deliver convincing evidence that flight MH17 was shot down by a Buck missile from the 9M38 series.
Добре, дякую.
Thank you.
Все, що я
Actually, that is I wanted to tell you today. The pre-court investigation continues, and we will inform you about new results upon consultations with the joint investigation team. In the Netherlands, they had issued a special law that all our reports to the public may be made public only after the fact, when we inform about all our findings, the victims.